He is biased in applying the keys. You don't know how to use those keys. Give them to me.
He's been called the Nostradamus of elections. He's correctly predicted 9 of the last 10. That is until the early hours of Wednesday morning, when CNN predicted Donald Trump would win the presidency. I'm talking about Professor Alan Lichtman. He says his 13 keys are how he makes his predictions for the White House. Here's the moment he realized his prediction was wrong.
I'm starting to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
She needs to make up 170,000 votes.
I don't see it. The big Democratic counties are mostly in.
No, well, yeah. Shit.
He couldn't turn the keys either, it seems. The keys were too powerful for him as well.
I just don't see it. Good thing I have nothing to do tomorrow.
Yeah, I took off work tomorrow.
And I'm not doing any interviews.
Good.
I'm done with that.
I get that.
So what happens to the keys now? Well, Professor Alan Lichtman is here with us tonight to tell us what he thinks went wrong. Professor, thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, we've talked many times. Were the keys wrong, or was your interpretation off this time?
The keys cannot fail you. You can only fail the keys.
I think the fundamental problem was the keys, not my interpretation. No one's convinced me that was wrong. There are unique features. I've always said, some unique features could break the patterns of history, and I think that's happened here. First of all, a unique feature specific to this election. And you've heard me say this before. I was very critical of the Democrats for openly and viciously trashing their sitting president right out in public. I have never seen...
They should have trashed him way harder. Actually, we're about to talk about that. That's going to be like the next thing. But like, they should have trashed Biden way harder. That was actually one of the main reasons Kamala lost. One of the main reasons maybe that Kamala shouldn't have been the presidential candidate, because she was too connected to Biden. Like, the Democrats needed some insider to step out and say, I think that Biden's thoroughly mishandled this, and I'm going to come out here and do it.
Seen that before, and
Biden genuinely threw this to Trump, like, unironically. We're going to talk about that, but like, Biden kind of evil's not the right word, but like, imagine a word that carried the moral weight of evil, but it refers not to the person's moral instinct, but rather to their selfishness and myopic nature.
Studied politics since the founding, and we saw Biden's approval rating plummet as they were doing that. I think that extended beyond Biden to weaken any Democratic candidates, since they're discrediting their own administration. Secondly, it rendered problematic one of my keys, the contest key, since we couldn't have a primary, but the Democrats did unite around Harris, and I turned the key in their favor, but we had never seen anything like that before, and that was problematic. But more importantly, are trends that are long-term and affect the long-term future of our democracy, and the keys, because the keys depend upon a rational, pragmatic electorate deciding on...
Why would you ever, it's like the most liberal thing I've ever heard. Why would you ever make that, why would you ever build a prediction machine built on the assumption that the voters are rational? That's insane.
Based on governance, whether the incumbent party should get 4 more years. And we've seen the explosion of some trends that have existed before, but not to this extent. Disinformation. Elon Musk is, I don't know how many hundreds of billions he has.
The world's foremost political Nostradamus says he failed to account for disinformation in his assessment of who would win. Not that hasn't been like the guiding strategy of the right for a decade, like for longer than a decade, certainly, but especially for the past decade.
He has been the director of misinformation. 2 billion views of his spreading of disinformation, not just about the economy, but about immigrants, about minorities. We've never seen disinformation at this scale.
Sorry, we forgot to account for the fact that people can lie.
To this scale, the agitation of 3 trends that have been very deeply embedded in American history: misogyny, racism, and xenophobia. The first anti-immigrant law was 1798, and Donald Trump wants to revive it. First it was the French, then the Germans, then the Jews, then the Mexicans, then the Muslims. There's always
A few other groups in there, too.
another. And of course, racism. We didn't even begin to dismantle Jim Crow until the 1960s, and it's still to some extent.
Why do liberals seem to be unable to admit that people can lie? Well, genuinely, it's because they can't. It's like a failure of modernism, their inability to understand that there are frameworks outside of their own. Their framework accounts for institutional trust, and for that reason, they just don't engage well with the idea that an entire political party could not only lie, but no longer be able to tell the difference between lies and truth. They're really, really bad at accounting for that. They think that things like shame matter. Have you ever seen what, mainstream liberal comment sections look like? Or, have you ever seen what resist libs are cooking on Twitter? They act like, and it's still wild to me they do this, they act like people like J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Donald Trump can be caught in a lie and shamed for it. They act, oh, I found out you're lying. Ha. They have no idea what the game is like anymore. They have no clue.
Extent survived. Women didn't vote until 1920. So that calls into question the whole premise behind the keys and behind our democracy.
Well, if it calls into question the premise of the keys, what about the fact that the pollster Nate Silver says that he used your keys to predict a Trump win?
Nate Silver has been criticizing the keys since he attacked me for my correct prediction early of Obama's reelection in 2011.
Dude,
he has
turn
a
your phone.
vested
You're on
interest
CNN.
in going against
you have
the
your
keys
phone
because
on?
they put him out of business. And look what he did this year. This is typical Nate Silver. He says Harris is marginally ahead. So the election is going to be, so close, 50-50. But it could go either way, with the swing states going one way to one candidate.
It is absolutely 100% true that you can't get much credit as an election predictor like Nate Silver if your predictions are, it's 50-50. It could be 50-50, but it could also be a blowout to either side, or it could be anything. Okay. There's no way to evaluate post hoc the viability of your analysis because your analysis factored in basically everything except a Reagan or FDR landslide,
Or the other. And he says, my gut favors Trump, but don't listen to my gut. So no matter what happens, Nate Silver can't be wrong and he can't be right because his predictions are meaningless. I admit I was wrong because I go out on a limb and tell you who's going to win or who's going to lose, and I don't try to squirm out of it. And as we're having this discussion, I'm very squarely trying
to do you hear
consider
that?
Why I went wrong, what it means for the future of our keys,
and the future of
our democracy.
Given the fact that you talk about some of the disinformation, which seems to be the trajectory of a lot of things that dealing with the democracy, do you intend, Professor Alan Lichtman, to change your keys or adjust to an additional, maybe a 14th one to adjust for that factor?
I don't intend to change my keys on the fly.
Does he know how to mute his computer and phone?
Particularly when these critiques come post hoc. It's very easy to say what you should do when you know the answer already. Much more difficult to do it in advance. And the keys go all the way back to 1860 in development and back to 1984 predictively. So I'm not going to.
By the way, I'm fully factoring this in with the Blue Anon condemnation, the idea that this is an example of people failing to understand the underlying reason why Kamala Harris lost and that the Democrats are doomed unless enough people within the party learn what's going on, if you get wrapped up in shit like this, he is biased in applying the keys. You don't know how to use those keys. Give them to me. He is wrong because he is biased. Nitpicking and biased. Bye-bye.
Quickly change the keys based upon some critique that comes after they know what happened. But I'm very seriously going to reconsider. And I'm also wondering, are we going to have a free and fair election in 2028, which would render the keys irrelevant, but much more, threaten our democracy? That's up in the air.
I don't hate Lichtman. I think he's really funny. Do you agree with Hassan's point that it's immoral to make fun of the 60% of Latino men who voted for Trump if they get deported in Trump's mass deportation plan? I can't muster the sympathy. You literally voted for it, man. If it's your family members or something, but like, that's the most Schadenfreude thing imaginable. I'm not gonna be like ultra double charitable because they're not white or whatever. Like, you literally hit the big red button that said deport people with my skin tone. I don't know what to say. Like, it's mean, but like, maybe don't vote in Hitler. I don't know. Like, that's mean. Isn't voting in Hitler mean? I feel like it is mean. Me feeling sad for Ernst Röhm after the Night of the Long Knives. Yeah, it's not exactly comparable, but like, yeah, it's, you know. I don't think you should be like racist against them. Like you should be racist against Latin people, or you should extend that bias towards Latin people broadly or anything like that. But if like there's a person who is known specifically to be like a MAGA Latino guy and he gets deported, you know, okay. What about sympathizing for those who voted against him? Well, those people wouldn't have voted for... I'm sorry, wait. I just said if you voted for MAGA and you get deported because of that, then that's one thing. Why would you interpret... How are you taking from that, like, well, what about sympathy towards people who didn't vote for him? Well, I wasn't talking about them, was I? Why are you implying that I'm, like, wrapping all those together in the same group? Trump has planned to end birthright citizenship via executive order on day one. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. It's going to be a little difficult. Lots of people on Leopards ate my face, r/Leopards ate my face, talking about trying to get their MAGA Latino neighbors deported, knowing Reddit 90% of them are making shit up for upvotes. They 100% are. Anytime you see a story online about a person getting a just comeuppance, especially right after an election, you should assume it's fake. Yeah, I voted for Kamala Harris, and of course I'm as devastated by the loss as anyone else. Anyway, I got back home and my obnoxious neighbor, who's this dark-skinned brown Latino guy who's really annoying and has MAGA merchandise he wears all the time and has 57 Trump signs all over the lawn. I was mowing my lawn the other day when I heard a cry from his house, "Ay caramba!" I went over there to ask what was wrong, and he said, "Mi amigo, is it true they're going to be deporting the illegal immigrants? I'm an illegal immigrant." And then I looked at him and I smirked and I said, guess you should have done some research on Reddit before, maybe you should have watched some CNN before you voted. And then I went back home and typed up this story. And then, you know, thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Yeah. That's true. It's real. It's happening every day. I saw it happen twice yesterday. Same. That's like every fucking Reddit story Jesus. Yeah, I know what Reddit's like. I'm aware of what a shithole it can be. Not as bad as Twitter, though.